in this video, I want to talk about lenses, and specifically the one I have here, which is the 14-35 f4 Canon lens. Now, I've essentially been using the f2.8 version of this lens, which is a 15-35, so not quite as wide, but I've really enjoyed this version. So I want to talk about that in this video. And it's not so much because of image quality or anything like that, because they're both great. There's nothing you can really fault when it comes to this lens in terms of the image quality, but it's for a reason that comes in before you even press the shutter button. So I want to go through that in a little bit more detail. I'm going to finish up taking a few more examples here, so we'll go through plenty of examples in the video as well, but a bit of a change of approach about how I think about gear, probably over the last maybe a year or so. So this lens definitely comes into that, and I want to go through that, so let's jump in. So I guess I started my own photography journey always using the widest possible aperture, and always using that widest possible aperture available on the lens I was using, not really caring about how heavy or cumbersome my bag was becoming carrying all these lenses. I'm not sure, maybe I'm just getting old and feel the effects of carrying heavier gear more and more these days, but it's not only the space and weight. I've also found more and more over the years that shooting at a wider aperture with more depth of field doesn't necessarily make the photos better. I think this is certainly true for most situations. Of course, don't get me wrong, having those wider apertures available definitely still has its benefits, especially in low light conditions. I also really like it for some forms of portrait photography as well, but really looking back at some of my favorite recent photos, none of them are really in low light conditions and none of them are portraits. They are typically these scenes with people, usually that overall scene carrying a lot of weight, which means most of these aren't shot wide open either. So if you watch my last video about what's in my bag for this year, you'll notice that I largely left out my 15-35 2.8 lens and opted for a much smaller and lighter lens, which is a 24mm 1.8 prime. So depending on what other lenses you're using, this 14-35 f4 lens is a really great alternative to cover those wider options. So this particular lens makes a lot of sense for me and the type of photography I like to shoot, and maybe it will suit you as well. I've only tested it out for about a month or so, and it is on loan, so sadly I no longer have this one available for me, but I am really considering swapping out my 2.8 lens for this one, and I may look for a second-hand one in Japan while I'm there and sell the 2.8 when I get back. Looking at the image quality, I really can't fault it in terms of the results, as this is still an L series lens. The quality really is exceptional, and you'll also know that it's really well built. If you are someone that likes to shoot really wide as well, even though it is only 1mm difference, at these wider focal lengths, you will be able to fit quite a bit more in your frame, even 14 compared to 15, which is the 2.8 version. Price wise, if we compare it to the 2.8 version, of course it comes in a fair bit cheaper, which is a big plus as well. And you are still getting a lot of benefits for choosing this lens. Looking at this lens purely as a landscape photography lens, I know some people may be a little bit hesitant picking it up if you shoot a little bit of astrophotography, but even at f4, especially with modern mirrorless cameras and how high you can really push your ISO, still get really clear images, Personally, I wouldn't be too worried about using this lens for astrophotography. If I really had to dig deep to find a downside for this lens, it would purely be for video and purely in low light conditions. Overall, it's a great lens for your day-to-day video conditions. It's really versatile, being 14 to 35, you can get so many different shots with this type of lens for video. Although once it gets a bit dark, depending on your camera, it might not be able to handle those higher ISO numbers. For me, I would swap it out for a prime at night if you're using for video. So this isn't a complete deal breaker for me, but if you use it predominantly for video and in low light, that's definitely worth considering. It may be better to go for the extra weight and pick up a 2.8 version. So a bit of a shorter one, not a full review on this lens, but I really don't have too much else to say on it. It is a great lens, and I just wanted to comment on my overall approach to how I choose lenses, and hopefully this is somewhat useful for you as well. So my next videos, I will be in Japan, hopefully chasing some cherry blossoms. So I'll catch you there very soon. Keep on creating and keep on growing, my friends. Bye for now.